Welcome to another show of Who Said Photography. Today's topic is going to be this big puppy versus
this little puppy.
this little puppy. We'll be back in 30 seconds. All right, so this conversation actually started when somebody came in and discussed they wanted a nice big lens. They wanted a 600 millimeter. And so it was one of the questions where it was, do I buy a 600 millimeter because I'm shooting a Nikon, or can I actually buy the Olympus with a 300 millimeter? And why would we go that route? Mainly because that is a 4/3. So if you work out the math, the 300 millimeter in a 4/3 camera is almost 600 millimeters.
Correct.
Yeah.
Actually, it is 600 millimeters. It's a 2 times conversion.
It's okay on the 4/3, it's a 2-time conversion. So now we come into a weight thing. This is pretty heavy. That's pretty light, but we're getting the same thing. So with this, hopefully it'll drop it. With this big one, so this one is an F4, so it's a little cheaper model. It cost about $1,300.
Well, it's F5.
Is it F5?
F5, 6.3, yeah.
Wow, it's even worse than I thought. 5 6.3. Okay.
Yeah, this is a 150 to
600.
600, yeah.
This is 150 to 600. This particular model is for a Nikon.
Yeah.
And it probably weighs about 5-6 pounds. Yeah. Weigh it. Okay, and that's another thing. When you turn the smaller
Well, keep in mind that this particular lens here that I have is equivalent to an 80 to 300, so it's actually a little bit smaller focal length than that. But the equivalent lens that Olympus makes to this particular lens down here is actually overall this length before you start zooming out, and it's a 75 to 300, so it works out to a 150 to 600.
150 to 600, yeah. So the price of that lens?
Well, this one here retails for around $249. The 75-300 retails for, I believe, between about $800.
About $800.
Yeah.
But again, okay. So there's a couple things we need to note. If you're a professional photographer, I almost guarantee that you're going to go for the higher end lens, anyways.
Yep.
But the Sigma makes a sport lens of this. So the sports lens is about $2,800. It's
about 25 actually.
Yeah, it's in there. It's a pretty pricey little thing. If you're looking for something that is not a lot of weight and you want to carry it around with you, you can carry 2 cameras if you're out shooting and you want to get a longer focal length. There's no reason why, for the price of this huge lens, you could get your Olympus camera and that other lens. Mm-hmm. Very, very similar.
Well, this body is about $1,000, $249 for that. So, I mean, if you're just looking for 2 lenses, if you get the other one, the longer one, it's going to be a little bit more money. You're looking at probably about, $1,800 before taxes. It all depends on what you want. And, a lot of these cameras that people are using here in the Micro Four Thirds, a lot of pros are using them too.
Well, that's the other thing I wanted to discuss. You're not losing anything with the Micro Four Thirds.
No.
You're actually gaining a lot because although it's a Micro Four Thirds, it's not a full frame. It's less money. Mm-hmm. I have a full frame Sony. So here's my full frame Sony right here. And it's one of the least inexpensive ones. It's a Sony Mark II, and it retails for $1,900, a little under $2,000. Again, full frame. I like my full frame, but on this side of it, this 70-200, which is huge compared to yours, and this is an F4. What's this one?
This one here is a variable aperture. It's a 4 to 5.6, so it's not going to be super, super fast, right?
But no, it's, I forgot to start the timer. Hope somebody in there's timing. I forgot to start the timer. Thanks.
I don't do a lot of telephoto photography, so this was sort of like an afterthought. I just picked up this. It's a small light lens. It goes in my bag when I do need it. If you stop down a stop or two from wide open, it's really sharp. That's why I bought it.
No, and to me it kind of makes sense. It's an interesting conversation, and the fact that when you start getting up in these style of lenses, I got to flip this one around. Hopefully you can see here. Now the image stabilization is in the lens, so that's going to make the lens heavier.
Yep, because you got that.
Totally heavier. So on that side of it, but with your camera, the image stabilization is in the camera.
Yeah, it's called IBIS, which is in-body stabilization, and it's better than the in-lens one because it gives you about 5 stops of image stabilization, and it also is a 5-axis, so 5 axis of movement, right? Which is really great. So you can actually, I've handheld this and got sharp pictures down to 1/4 of a second. It's not something I would want to do regularly, but in a pinch it works.
But you can handhold that with that other lens on, no problem.
Correct.
This is going to kill you after a while. So if you're out trying to take pictures of the eagles or the birds or using the telephoto chasing the bears sort of idea, and you're spending a full day out there, this is going to wear you out. That one should be okay. You shouldn't have to worry about it too much. Plus the 5 axis is in there. So on that side of it, you're further ahead. So,
but even the pro lenses for this system, like Panasonic makes a 35 to 100, which is essentially a 2.8, which is essentially basically a 70 to 100 or 200.
yes.
That's 2.8 lens, and it's about this size.
Yep.
So you can imagine now you've got a 70-200 f4, and Panasonic makes a 70-200 2.8 equivalent. That's this size, you know.
That's exactly it.
That's the thing. Now, one thing about Micro Four Thirds, you're talking about full frame. I think about the biggest area where us smaller sensor shooters are going to miss out on is going to be basically in low light photography with noise.
Right.
We can still get fairly, in fact, really good image quality when we use these cameras. The big one is going to be, you know, low noise. I don't do a lot of low light photography anyway, so it's not a big issue.
Well, we compromise. No matter what we do, we have to compromise on what we're shooting and what we're going to do anyways. But to me, it's just an interesting conversation of carrying this thing around all day or carrying that around. Now, that's why I thought it was like, realistically, from a price point advantage, if you don't know what you want, but from a price point advantage, you can get into a complete system, and it's going to fit for where you want to be. And I can carry that as a spare camera. So if I'm out with my Sony or I'm out with my Nikon or Canon, and I've got all my landscapes, I can stick that in my bag, and I'm still not the heaviness of this. I'm not carrying that extra 5, 6, 8 pounds for that extra lens. Now, I know when I was shooting my Canon equipment, I had the 120 to 400, and when I went out shooting, I went out with my 120 to 400 and nothing else, because I knew it was a heavy camera, and I knew I was going to shoot on one side. But if you're zipping away on a retreat or zipping away on a tour or something like that, there's no reason why that couldn't go the same with your other equipment. It's so small, it'll fit in and away you go.
Yep.
Now, you've mentioned a few pro photographers that are using this.
Quite a few. Actually, it's growing.
Is it growing?
Yep.
It's growing quite popularity. Now, is there a lot of landscape photographers that are using this?
Yep.
A lot of...
yes, there is, yeah.
Is there? Well, see, there you go. So that's got some credibility on it as well.
When I really tweaked onto the Micro Four Thirds system was actually when they first started making mirrorless cameras. And 2 guys who I knew were local landscape photographers were talking about this system. They were actually quite excited about the Olympus and the Panasonic cameras. And the reason why they was because, first off, they do a lot of hiking. They're also older. You know, they were, at this point here, I think they were well into their 70s. So they were looking for a lightweight system that basically would carry them, you know, they'd be able to carry a lot of gear. in a smaller package for a longer period of time. And the image quality was very important to these guys too. And you know, I was the same way as you. If it's not full frame, I'm not going to even look at it. But you know, I've since changed my tune as far as that goes, because I've seen the proof, and you know, I've made some big images, but you've seen them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it's still a 16 megapixel camera, the camera side of it. But
yeah.
You know, really, the conversation and the topic that I wanted to talk about was the fact that you don't, if you're going to go out and you're going to spend a fair amount of money on a telephoto lens, and you want to get that reach for 600 millimeter, it may be possible, the fact that if you can't afford, well, the $1,300, I think I said, it's on sale, $1,249, you know, and you don't want to be carrying this around. This is in the same price range. That's a camera and a lens within the same price range of this, and it's comparable to what you've already got. So on that side of it, to me, it's one of those things where it's a balancing act. If I can get a full camera that's going to give me a 600 millimeter, maybe I don't want to go out and buy an expensive lens. See, Sony came out with the 120 to 400 just recently, and I believe it's in the $1,600, $1,800 range. Well, now I'm up there again. So can I competently get that system, carry a second body and things like that, and carry it around with me as well? That's going to only work with a 4/3. I have an APS-C size on this one. Mm-hmm. So I have the 210. So with the 210, it's not doubling. It's not giving me 400 millimeters. Again, the APS-C is 1.6 or 1.5. Again, I'm not getting. So I'm only getting 425 out of it. Actually, the 210, I think is 1 times 2 is, 260, 280? In that ballpark there. So I'm not getting the range.
Oh, you mean like with the 1.5 times, so at 210, it's actually about
my
340.
340.
Yeah.
So I'm not getting anywhere close to 600.
No.
Okay. So, but the other question is, and now that I'm thinking about this, I can get a doubler to magnify this from 600 to 800 or to 1200. Can I do the same thing with the Olympus system? Is it out there yet?
Yeah, they have doublers and whatnot too. One thing I wanted to point out as well is I can buy a very inexpensive adapter put on this Nikon mount lens, put on this camera, and now I'm effectively doubling this focal length to 300 to 1200.
There we go as well.
So there's an advantage right there. The other thing too is if you look at their Pro lenses, they make a 300 f4, which is about almost this size here.
Yeah.
Right, the actual physical lens, including the lens shade. The lens shade's extra. So they make a 300 f4, which is equivalent to about a 600 f4. It's about $3,300. Now, yeah, that sounds expensive, but when you look at a Nikon or Canon 600 millimeter f4, which is large, big around like that and very long, that's about $15,000.
Yeah. Well, right? That's a valid point. That's a valid point as well. This is a fairly inexpensive. This is the lower end model.
Still does good results though.
Yeah, it still has good results. But let's not forget that also the next step up from this is called the Sport.
Yeah.
For those guys that are shooting outside in the cold and.
Well, that'll be the better version. It's actually going to be optically better. I think the focus mechanism, the stabilization's slightly better on those too.
Correct. No, which is fine. But again, you're up there in price. Mm-hmm. And if I'm going that route and I'm only doing this as a hobby, there's a way to save money. That's a perfect way to save money. I'm $1,000 less on that side of it.
Well, when I got into the system, it wasn't to save money, but you're right about that.
It's like...
it was more to save weight.
Well, again, save weight and save money.
Yeah. Now I can bring a camera with me all the time.
Yeah.
Literally.
It takes up no room whatsoever.
None.
Again, and it could be your second camera.
Oh, yeah.
It certainly very easily could throw it in as your second camera.
Even the prime lenses, like this one here, are very tiny. You know, this is equivalent to a 15 millimeter fisheye, but it's so small.
Correct. You know, and that's one of those things that it's like, you know, you have to figure out what you want to do. But this is an option I never thought about until somebody came in and talked to us. This is an option I never even looked at. And when we started discussing it, it was something that was like, well, this kind of makes sense. Mm-hmm. It totally makes sense because I can carry a big lens, or I can downsize and get basically what I'm trying to accomplish on a 600 millimeter telephoto on a complete system in there.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So and pros are using this camera, according to you. Pros are using this camera.
Actually, quite a few.
And so, and that side of it, you know, if well, you know, wouldn't be interesting if we can get the Olympus guy to come out and show us all about the camera. We'll have to work on that. Let's get the Olympus guy here.
There was a very interesting article I read once on Petapixel, I think it was, a photographer who has switched over to Micro Four Thirds, and the one thing he said is that his clients really don't pay attention or care what kind of camera you use. And as far as the slightly lower resolution, he solved that problem by using alien skin blow up, which actually would boost it up without losing any image quality.
Yeah. No.
And then he had 50 megapixel equivalent files that came straight out of the camera that he was able to sort of like pump through his software and give to his clients, and they were happy. And he does a lot of big clients too.
No, and I understand that. It's really, it's like I said, it just, I never thought of it that way. Mm-hmm. I never thought of it. Usually I was Canon, I'd go buy a Canon or a Sigma lens. And I'd spend the money for quality lenses. My 70-200, my Canon, I paid $2,100 for back in early 2010, 25, 205, somewhere in that area there. And that's what it was. But the Micro Four Thirds weren't out.
No.
At that particular time. So technology has changed so much that these are available. And I'm not trying to force everybody to go that direction. I want you to look and know what your options are. And now that this option's out there, it's like, well, isn't that interesting? That's something I can do. I don't have to spend a lot of money. I can go that direction. Stop punching me.
We got the high sign.
5 minutes left. I think that was 5 minutes left. So, anything else you want to say about that?
Well, actually, one thing about it, if you know what Bob said about all the other brands out there and DSLRs in general are true. One thing, if you're looking at an entry-level camera, a DSLR is still going to be your best value, right? From either Canon or Nikon or a place like that. They're going to be very inexpensive. But when you start getting into the pro gear, that's when you start spending a lot more money. If you look at some of the mirrorless options out there, you can get into pro gear a lot cheaper, and I think that's the big thing we wanted to point out today too about that.
Yeah.
Cheaper, less weight, and it's not just Olympus, Panasonic, there's also Fuji out there, and of course Sony, which has actually really dominated the market lately, especially on the full frame side. You get a small full frame camera like that. I mean, look at the equivalent with Nikon or Canon.
Well, that's exactly it. They're massive. I went from a crop sensor, 7D, to the full frame Sony, and I was carrying 2 lenses and the camera. And when I changed to the Sony system, basically the same lenses, I dropped 10 pounds of weight out of my backpack. Mm-hmm. So for me, to me that was big. Now, I didn't know about this one at the time.
I dropped 25 or 30 pounds actually.
Well, yeah, very easily.
Yeah.
If you're doing a lot of hiking, it's great to be able to do things like that. But it was like when the individual came in and brought this up, it was like lights and bells are going off. It's like, wow. So,
Eureka.
Anything else you want to say?
No, we covered it.
No, covered it all.
Yeah.
Again, there is a different option for you. Mm-hmm. Again, do a little bit of research on the web. I don't know what else to say.
You can't make a wrong choice here.
No, there's no wrong choice.
What you go with.
Good point. There's no wrong choice here. But if you're looking for a 600 millimeter, keep this as an option. If you're shooting Nikon or Canon, this is certainly an option. If you're looking for a long telephoto lens, mm-hmm. You might be able to get into a small, cheaper system and carry 2 systems. A lot of us carry 2 cameras. You carry 2 cameras?
Well, it's complicated. I do, yeah.
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It depends on what I'm doing. But anyways, anything else? Like to end the show?
No.
That's it? All
Yeah.
right. We're done.
Good to be back.
All right. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Who Said Photography.
Bye.